All right, so this is a trend defining mechanism, or kind of a trend filtering mechanism here. So the primary trend direction is determined by the EMA 200, right? So the slowest moving average. It basically has the heaviest weighting here, and is the primary moving average for determining the trend. Now, there's going to be two exceptions here that can override the slowest moving average here. So if there is a strong trend direction, a strong slope in the opposite direction of the two fastest moving averages, or the fastest and the medium moving average. So in other words, the EMA 20 and the EMA 100 together, or the EMA 20 and the EMA 50 together, right? So both combinations must have a good, strong slope, and in which case they can override the slope of the slower moving average there, the EMA 200. And I just want to see if I can find some good examples. Well, the EMAs are pretty quick reacting, so I may not find some great examples, but yeah, I guess this area right here ought to work good enough. So we do have the EMA 20 shooting up pretty rapidly, and even the EMA 50 is angling up pretty good as well. So, all right. Well, so with that, let's pull up BloodHound and get our first question started here. So let's go to the logic tab here, and we need to start a new logic template like so. There's a name for what we're doing there. So we have a slow moving average trend, but then there's also it comes with a fast MA trend override there. All right, well, let's start simple and build more complex, right? So the simplest rule here is, the primary determination of the trend is our slow EMA, right? So the 200 period EMA. So let's grab a slope solver there, connect that in, and let's name this. So this is the EMA 200, and so let's change our input to the EMA. All right, there's the EMA. Let's change it over to the 200 period, like so. And there we go. All right, well, interesting. Looks like we have a couple of bars here where that EMA does start sloping up ever so slightly. Yeah. All right, so that's our primary trend direction. And the way that we're going to override this is eventually we're going to use the if-then programmer node here. All right. So this will come into play here at some point. So we'll get back to this in a moment here. All right, so now let's build the overrides, right? So the fastest moving average, needs to have a steep slope on it in the opposite direction there. So we're going to grab another slope solver. And so now we need to play around with the minimum or the maximum and minimum slope here. And probably 2 ticks ought to be pretty darn steep. And it looks like that's a little too steep, maybe. Yeah, so let's try 1.5. Right, so finding, the appropriate, slope amount, is a bit of an art. You just have to play around with it for a little bit. Let's see. Wow, even 1.5 doesn't do much. So let's go knock it down to just 1 tick of slope. And there we go. All right. That's a little better there. Yeah. So we can see, right, as the 20, reverses upwards, eventually we do hit, at least 1 tick of slope there. So, all right. So we'll leave this at, or we'll start it at 1 tick of slope there. All right, so now let's move on to the EMA 50. So let's grab another slope solver. And actually, I'm just going to jump over to the solvers tab here, and let's get rid of that extra slope solver. And I'm going to take the existing one that I already made. Let's make a copy of it here. And we'll switch that over to the EMA 50. Now the EMA 50, I'm going to start off at half a tick of slope, right? We can see on the chart here that the 50 obviously doesn't start sloping up nearly as much as the EMA 20 does. All right, so let's change our, look at that. All right. First problem found already. I didn't change the indicator over. It's still on the SMA 14. So let's change that out there. Kind of jump the gun a little bit. All right, there's the EMA. And let's plug in a 20 period. Okay, so let me delete that. Let's go back to the logic board here and so now that we have the EMA 20, I want to take another look at our slope amount there. So yeah, I'm going to knock that down just a fraction there. Let's go 9/10 of a tick. There. All right. A little bit better. So there we go. So there we have a few more bars, right, where the EMA 20 is, hitting that high slope angle there. All right. Let's adjust the name. All right. So remember, it's always a good idea to make sure that your naming convention, keeps up with any adjustments that you make. That way, later on, you don't get confused there. Okay, so now let's jump back to the solvers tab here. And I can take that EMA 20 slope solver, make a copy of it. And we'll adjust it to the 50 period. But also, I'll start off at half a tick of slope there. So let's go into the indicator and adjust the period to 50. And then let's go into the slope amounts and knock it down to half a tick. Here we go. And then let's go back over to the logic board, and I can go to my solver nodes, existing nodes, and there is the EMA 50. Put it on there. And I'm going to grab an AND node and start doing some testing here. So there we go. So we do have a couple of bars here where both the 20 and the 50, meet that high slope angle there. So, so those couple of bars could override the EMA 200. But let me knock this down just a tad bit and see what happens. there. Well, yeah, it doesn't seem to start the override anytime sooner. All right, so I'll leave it at that. Actually, no. I'll put that back to 0.5. There. All right. So we have this AND node here, right, which is looking at both the EMA 20 and the EMA 50. All right, to make sure that they have that nice steep slope there. So, all right. So I'm going to name that AND node. There we go. And so now we need to do one more of these groups here, right? And that's going to be the 20 and the 100 period EMA. So let's go back to the Solvers tab. And let's make a copy of one of our existing nodes again. And we'll adjust the name here. And then we'll probably have to knock the slope down to maybe 1/4 of a tick. All right, so we'll start there and see how that works out. So let's change our EMA to the 100 period. There we go. And let's put 1/4 of a tick in there, like so. All right, so now we have our EMA 100 to test out. So let's go back to the logic board, our solver nodes, and there is that EMA 100 slope solver. Let's put it on here and let's just check it out. Yeah, it doesn't look like our 100 is gonna override the slower EMA. You know, I am on range charts, so that definitely kind of constrains the angle of the EMA. You know, if I switch over to a 200 or a 2-minute chart, things will be different there. So yeah, let me do that. There we go. Close that. And we'll switch over to a 2-minute chart. Here we go. All right. So here's what I'm looking for, right? So here's the 200. We can see it's still barely sloping down, but then the EMA 100. Wait, which one's the 100? There we go. Sorry, that is the EMA 100. Does begin to slope up that 1/4 of a tick before the EMA 200 reverses directions, right? So all right, so let's leave it on a 2-minute chart here. Okay, so here's our EMA 100 with 1/4 of a tick of slope in it. And let's grab another AND node. So we need the EMA 20 and the EMA 100. There we go. Let's connect that in. And let's name this AND node here. So this is going to be the EMA 20. Oops. 20 and the 100 there. All right. And all right, yeah, so we can see, oh, here we go, perfect. So we do have some overrides, which is great, right? We can see right here, our 200 is sloping down still pretty good, but our 20 and 100 will override the 200 there. So there we go. And I'm sure we probably have some 20 and 50 EMA overrides here as well. Yep. So there we go. Okay, so we have our overrides here, essentially. And we need to join these overrides together into one. right? So here's an OR node. So, all right, so this is our basically our fast EMA overrides, or I should say, faster MA overrides. Right. So here's all, so we can see now all the possible overrides here. Right. Okay, so now, so now comes the tricky part here, where we are slicing and dicing, the various outputs to go into the to control the if-then node. Let's see. So I know that I want the overrides to go into the else, and I'll take the main slope direction, put that into the then. All right, so now what I need to figure out is I need to know when the override disagrees with the primary trend direction, right? So for example, let's connect. Right, so remember the EMA 200 is our primary slope direction. Here, let's pull this a little closer. There we go. And let's see, let's mark this. All right, so I've identified right where the EMA 200 reverses directions. So, right, we know that's sloping down. And then we know, oops, wrong one. There. All right, we'll just stay focused here. Right, so our EMA 200 is generating a short output, and we want to know when the overrides are generating a long output. Here. There. All right. Yeah, let's see. So, I think there's probably a couple of ways to do this. I'm going to just experiment here with the XOR node and see if that's going to do anything. Yeah, I might come back to that. I think that way is going to be a little more difficult to understand. So I'm going to take what I think will be a simpler approach here. All right. So I'm using the long short modifier to swap the output direction, right? So remember, this used to be a long output, and now it's a short output. And so with that, I'm going to have to make some room here. Yeah, let's see. Let's see, that's not the output I'm looking for. Okay. I'm getting there. Yeah. All right. I think that's what we want. Let's take a look. Yeah. All right. I believe that's it. Yeah, there we have it. All right, so let me kind of break this down and explain what's going on here. Okay, so let's start from the beginning again. So we have the main trend direction here. Yeah, let's zoom in a little bit. Right. So our faster, I'm sorry, our slower moving average, right, is sloping down. And we have a couple of areas here, right, where the EMA 20 and 50 are angling up, enough to override, right, the longer term trend. So, right, so we're looking at the EMA 200, and then over here we have our overrides, right? So coming from this OR node, right, we have our two override rules there, and there we go. I've just circled, or highlighted them for convenience there, right? So to put this simply, if there's no long output in the opposite direction, right, of the EMA 200, then we want a short output, right? So we want to, so in other words, we want to keep this short output unless we have those overrides in the opposite direction. So what I did is I took the overrides, right? And actually, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I might rework. Yeah, I might rework this logic again here. But the way I did this is we took the overrides and we reversed the outputs. Right? Using the long short modifier, we're using the swap mode to reverse the long output to a short output, and then into an XOR node, right? Which we can see that with the XOR node, when the overrides are active, right, there's no short output, right? We managed to remove the short output when the overrides are active here, right? And also, every once in a while, we do get this long output here. And because of the if-then node, I wanted to strip out that long output, right? So we don't want this long output kind of interfering with the switches inside the if-then. So to understand that, so if you don't understand why we need to remove this long output, then that's a much lengthier discussion, and what you'll need to do is look at the video on how the if-then works so that you understand how the switches inside the if-then works. All right, so what you can do is, at your convenience, let's go to the documentation page. Let's pull that up. And on the side menu here, I'm going to scroll down to the function, scroll down to the logic nodes, and down here is the if-then node. So, right, so we can click on the if-then node, and there you go. There's the documentation with some images that kind of explain how the switches work inside. But more importantly, here's a tutorial video, which goes into great detail there. So the short version is we need to remove this long output so that it doesn't interfere with, so there's no erroneous output from the if-then node. So I don't want the long output switch to be messed with, to be activated with the if-then node. So the way I got rid of this long output here, and right, so we can see we have a bunch of bars here that have a long output when our EMA 200 is in a downtrend, right? So that's what the AND node does here, right? You can see that this AND node has our EMA 20 slope and the XOR. So if I take a look at that, right, there we go. So look, the long output is gone, right? So if the EMA is sloping down, there's going to be no long output anymore because of the AND node there. And so now I have a nice clean signal or signals, or a nice clean kind of trend. Well, yeah, I guess signals is the correct word. I have some nice clean signals going into the if-then node now. Right. And so the AND node here, if I move this up, we can see the AND node is connected in to the if connector of the if-then node. Right. And then we'll look there. So that's how this is working. And let's see, I had an idea that let's see, this may not actually, this may not be any easier here, but let's see, with an inverter. Yeah, you know, 6 or half dozen the same. So I could use the inverter versus the XOR node, and I get the same result. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure if the inverter really is any better than the XOR node. It's probably not. So let's just keep it with the XOR node there. All right, so there we go. That's how you can build a kind of a trend override type of system there, right? So here we have our override, and so remember, and so the the override, right, is going to give you an output in the opposite direction, right, of your primary trend direction. Dean also wants to add an ATR value to this as well. Okay, so an ATR filter. So he needs an ATR greater than 0.3 on a 1 minute chart. All right, last thing to add in here. All right, so coming out of this if-then node is basically our EMA trend. And we're going to add a threshold solver. All right, and this threshold is going to look at the ATR, right? And we want it to be greater than 0.3. Yep. Okay, greater than 0.3. So for the indicator, let's switch that over to the ATR. There's our ATR, and I'll just leave it on the 14 period. And we're looking for a value of 0.3. So I'm going to put that in twice. And then for the outputs, we're going to set the greater than 0.03, or 0.3, sorry, 0.3. We're going to set that on for the long output and for the short output. So remember, volatility doesn't have a direction. It's just volatility. So you need the long and the short output set together, right? And one last thing, Dean wanted this on the 1 minute chart. So let's go over to the solvers tab here, and we need to add a 1 minute time frame or a 1 minute chart to our system here. So we're going to hit the chart button, And by default, it creates a 1 minute chart. And so now we need to take our ATR threshold solver and move it down onto the 1 minute chart here. So we're going to select our threshold solver and then use the down button. All right, so the up and down buttons just move solvers between charts or between time frames. Right, there we go. So now the ATR is running on the 1 minute chart, like so. And then last step is we need another AND node, like so. And there we have it. All right, save that, close that, and you'll notice since we added a secondary time frame to BloodHound, we have to reload the chart so that NinjaTrader can load that 1 minute chart for BloodHound. So let's go in and do a F5 or a reload, and there we have it. So it looks like, well, at least on a 2 minute chart, yeah, it looks like the ATR is always above 0.3. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, at least on the RTY, it looks like 0.3 is a little low, but in any case, you know, of course, you can adjust the 0.3 to however you see fit. You know, let's try 0.5. There we go. 0.5 every once in a while. You know, a bar gets stripped out. And yeah, there we go. So we can see, right, when price looks like it's kind of consolidating a little bit, not very active. There we go. Every once in a while we'll get a few bars there that don't meet the volatility. So there we go. So I'll leave that on 0.5 at least, you know, for my 2 minute RTY chart. Okay, there we go. So that was the final filter there to Dean's question.